On April 17, 2022, at approximately midnight, a hacker pressed enter on a keyboard. Within seconds, the government of an entire country began to collapse. Not a war, not a coup, not a missile, a ransomware attack. And the door they walked through, a single stolen password. This is the story of the 2022 Costa Rica ransomware attack. The day a criminal syndicate called Conti declared war on a sovereign nation and nearly won. You're watching Synapse Cybersecurity. Real stories, real threats. Before we talk about Costa Rica, we need to talk about Conti. Because Conti was not a group of teenagers in hoodies, it was a company. A real functioning company with a CEO, a general manager, an HR department, developers on salary, and performance reviews. Based in Russia and known to law enforcement by the codename Wizard Spider, Conti operated like a tech startup that happened to extort hospitals, schools, and governments for a living. Their business model was called ransomware as a service. They built the malware, they maintained the infrastructure, they then licensed it to criminal affiliates who carried out the attacks. Conti collected roughly 30% of every ransom paid. It was a franchise for extortion. By early 2022, the FBI confirmed over 1,000 victims and more than $150 million in ransom payments. In 2021 alone, they earned an estimated $180 million, more than any other ransomware group in history. Their developers earned between $1,500 and $2,000 a month. Their ransomware ran on 32 simultaneous processing threads, making it faster at destroying your files than nearly any other competing malware on the planet. And then, in a single weekend, everything fell apart. On February 24, 2022, Russia invaded Ukraine. The very next day, Conti posted a public statement pledging full support for the Russian government. They threatened retaliatory cyber attacks against any nation that opposed Moscow. Within 48 hours, someone inside the group snapped. A Ukrainian member of Conti, identity unknown to this day, created a Twitter account called Conti Leaks and dumped 60,000 internal chat messages. The group's source code, their attack playbooks, their salary records, and their entire operational infrastructure. In one move, a decade of secrecy was gone. Cybersecurity researchers called it the Panama Papers of ransomware. The chats revealed a criminal organization with no moral floor, support for Putin, anti-Semitic messages, discussion of targeting civilian infrastructure with no concern for casualties. Now, here's where the story gets interesting. Conti was exposed, humiliated, and legally radioactive. Every intelligence agency on Earth was studying their leaked playbooks. Affiliates were abandoning them, the group was dying. So, they did what cornered, desperate organizations do. They lashed out, and Costa Rica was in the wrong place at the wrong time. On April 11th, 2022, a Conti affiliate, only known as Member X, did something shockingly simple. He used a stolen VPN credential, likely harvested through a phishing campaign, to log into the Ministry of Finance of Costa Rica. Investigators later found that exposed remote desktop services had been sitting open on government networks for months, waiting for someone to walk through. No sophisticated exploit, no zero-day vulnerability, a password and an open port. That was the door. Once inside, Member X deployed over 10 Cobalt Strike beacons across the network. Think of these as invisible remote control agents planted silently on servers waiting for instructions. Nobody noticed. Then came the reconnaissance. Using tools called NLTest, ShareFinder, and AdFind, Member X spent days quietly mapping every server, every file share, every connected system in the government's network. He downloaded the complete asset list to his own machine. Then he stole the keys to everything. Using a tool called Mimikatz, he pulled password hashes directly from Windows memory. Then he ran a technique called Zero Login, a known, publicly documented Windows vulnerability that had been sitting unpatched for 2 years, allowing an attacker to instantly become the administrator of any connected network. He did not pick one lock. He cloned the master key to every door in every government building linked to that network. To cover his retreat, he installed a legitimate remote access tool called Lateral on quiet, low-traffic servers, a hidden backdoor in case the front entrance was ever sealed. On April 15th, the data started moving. Using a tool called rclone, Member X uploaded over 672 gigabytes of government data directly to mega.nz, a free public file hosting site. Tax records, customs data, internal documents. By some estimates, the total volume of exfiltrated data approached 1 terabyte. The financial backbone of a nation gone. Then, on the night of April 17th, he pressed the button. Conti ransomware detonated across nearly 30 government institutions simultaneously. Costa Rica woke up to a country that could not file taxes, process trade, or pay its own workers. The Ministry of Finance told the public it was a technical problem. That same afternoon, Conti posted 5 gigabytes of stolen government data on the open internet. It was not a technical problem. The first review of affected systems found 35,000 malware communication requests, 9,900 phishing incidents, and 60,000 attempts to remotely control government infrastructure, and that was just in the first 100 institutions reviewed. The customs system, CISA, was completely offline. Containers stacked at ports, import and export frozen, industry groups issued a formal warning, restore the system or face a total paralysis of international trade. Economists estimated the damage at $30 million per day. Outgoing President Carlos Alvarado drew the line in the sand. The Costa Rican state will not pay anything to these cyber criminals. Conti responded by raising the ransom from $10 million to $20 million. Then they posted something that no ransomware group had ever posted before, a public statement that read, "We are determined to overthrow the government by means of a cyber attack." They called Costa Rica a beta test, a dry run for a global attack on an entire country. On May 8th, newly inaugurated President Rodrigo Chavez, in office for less than 24 hours, signed Executive Decree 43542, a national state of emergency, the first ever declared by a head of state because of ransomware. 8 days later, he stood at a podium and said, "We are at war. This is not an exaggeration." Back in the streets, 16,000 Ministry of Education workers were protesting. 3,000 of them had received zero payment. Payroll was being calculated by hand using old data, running essentially blind. Costa Rica's Supreme Court upheld over 200 constitutional lawsuits filed by unpaid workers against their own government. And then, just when it seemed like the worst was over, the printers started. At 2 a.m. on May 31st, in hospitals across Costa Rica, printers began running by themselves. Nobody was in the room. The pages coming out were ransom notes. A second group, Hive ransomware, had arrived. The Costa Rican Social Security Fund, the CCSS, the backbone of the country's entire public healthcare system, had been hit. On June 1st, officials admitted the damage was 27 times greater than first reported. 800 servers encrypted, 9,000 computers offline, nearly 5,000 medical appointments canceled on the first day alone, 12,000 on day 2. Hospitals reverted entirely to paper records. Doctors could not locate patients mid-procedure. Pharmacies ran at 37% capacity. The entire healthcare system of a country run on handwriting and memory. Hive demanded $5 million. Costa Rica refused to pay. What investigators would later discover was deeply unsettling. Hive had been actively collaborating with Conti since at least November 2021. They were the same organism split across 2 names. And when the FBI dismantled Hive in January 2023, after secretly operating inside the group for 7 months, its members simply scattered and continued under new identities. On May 19, 2022, Conti's websites went dark. By late June, every server, every negotiation channel, every leak site was gone. The Conti brand was dead. But here's the detail that changes everything. Cybersecurity analysts at Adviintel later revealed that Conti's real internal ransom demand for Costa Rica was far below $1 million. The $20 million figure was a performance. This was never about money. It was a dying group exposed and humiliated by their own members trying to make the world remember their name one last time. They used a stolen password. They exploited a vulnerability that had been public knowledge for 2 years. They uploaded 672 gigabytes of a sovereign nation's most sensitive data to a free file hosting website, and they brought down a country. Since 2022, ransomware attacks across Latin America have surged. Brazil, Mexico, Chile, Colombia, every nation in the region watched Costa Rica burn, and most of them still have not patched the same vulnerabilities. The lesson Costa Rica paid $30 million a day to learn is simple. Basic security hygiene, patch management, multi-factor authentication, network segmentation, these are not optional. They're the difference between a functioning government and a national emergency. The question's not whether this can happen again. It already has. The question is what stands between your organization and the exact same outcome. This has been Synapse Cybersecurity. Stay aware, stay protected.